Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back for another EVE Online video. Today's video is going to be an extra video because I want to talk a little bit about the latest dev blog that CCP has released, where they talk about the Quantum Core, a new item that they want to introduce to the game specifically for structures. And so I also want to basically increase the visibility of this dev blog so far. I feel like it's gone under the radar a little bit, and what I don't want to see is more comments of people that took a break from EVE Online only to find their structures completely gone because of the abandoned state. For instance, I actually have a couple of comments where people mentioned that this happened to them. They basically lost everything that they owned already, thinking it was safe at the time. And that's definitely not very good motivation to keep playing EVE Online. So if we can increase the exposure specifically for structure owners, let's try to do that. If you want to read the dev blog for yourself, you can always go to eveonline.com. Now you don't get those links in this current setup here, but top left you actually have a news button which brings you to the articles website, and then down here we have the dev blogs with quantum cores. And I'm not going to read through everything here, but a couple of passages are pretty important. For instance, the quantum cores will become a necessary item involved in the deployment phase of structures. In order for a structure to fully complete its deployment phase, the quantum core must be installed into the structure after the initial 24-hour anchoring phase. And this once the structure becomes dockable after that anchoring phase. The quantum core will need to be installed into the core room in order for the structure to proceed past that initial onlining vulnerable state. So basically you do get now a full diagram of the life cycle of a structure. It becomes rather complex here, but let's give it a try. You deploy a structure that then has to anchor. It first goes through a 15-minute repair timer. After that you have a 24-hour timer, and before that, that's when you would basically hit perhaps another repair timer. I don't even think so. You'd become shields. But now, after that 24-hour timer, your station or structure will remain vulnerable with hull HP only until you put in the quantum core and install that in the right bay. After that you get another 15-minute repair timer, and it's only after that that the shields go up basically on your station and everything can be online and you can get started with that. So it's basically giving you a little bit of extra work to fully online a structure, and it's also going to increase the cost. Now, another important aspect of the quantum core is that lore-wise, it's basically going to be put into the core room, the very center of your structure, and as a result, it'll never be destroyed when the structure is destroyed, and it will always drop. So it will have a 100% drop chance. It basically becomes an incentive for players to clean up structures that may hold one of these quantum cores, because they will become guaranteed drops and potentially quite vulnerable. Down here CCP is giving us a list of what they're planning to do with these quantum cores. Now keep in mind it's just a dev blog, so it might be subject to change, but for now it looks like the medium structures, Astrus, Athanor and Raitaru, will have 600, 700, 800 million ISK, so almost a billion ISK for the value of one of these quantum cores. Then going up to large structures, we're talking 4 billion, 3.5 billion and 3 billion for Fortizar, Tatara and Asbel. I myself have an Asbel up and running, so I will have to make a 3 billion ISK investment in order to get that quantum core. And then finally we have a Keepstar for 30 billion ISK and then a Sotio for 10 billion ISK. That does become rather juicy, of course. Or also, because down here you can see that this will only be purchasable from NPC stations. So it's a long time since we've seen CCP do this. They're not creating these quantum cores as something that becomes part of the manufacturing cycle. This is not going to be made by the players, but this is just becoming a straight up ISK faucet, destroying ISK in order to get these quantum cores. You have to pay it straight to the NPCs. After that, of course, the item becomes part of the sandbox. It can be dropped on an explosion, and then you can also transport it, trade it, all of that good stuff. And so this basically does make it an incentive for more destruction of structures, and perhaps also a disincentive for just randomly plonking down tons of structures that you're never really intending to fully use. Now, another thing to note here is the volume for medium structures, quite okay, 500 cubic meters, very doable in quite a lot of ships. Then for the large ones, 50,000 cubic meters, still doable. I think one of my transport ships can very easily grab that. But for Keepstar and Sotio, 250,000 cubic meters. I think that's freighter only, at least that's what I'm presuming, because the number one complaint of this dev block so far is that wormhole space has been forgotten, or at least they feel like they've been forgotten, because there are groups that run Keepstars and Sotios. I think specifically Sotios is more likely in low-class wormholes that will have a very difficult time getting these types of volumes through any of their wormhole connections. I think in theory, it can still be done. You can move one of these cores into a C5 or a C6, I think, and then you basically need to hope for a connection to your wormhole, but I'm not sure if that's even possible in something like a C2 or a C1. Maybe it's like super rare. So definitely something that I think might be subject to change. Unless CCP just says, yeah, we don't want these types of structures in these low-level wormholes, which is a little bit unfortunate. Kind of want to interject this little story, you could say, for me as well. I once lived in a C1 wormhole with a high-sec connection, but that was back in the days with just the bosses, so the player-owned star bases on the moons there. It was an amazing experience, and it was so much fun to build oversized stuff in that tiny wormholes where only up to battle cruisers could enter it through the wormholes. And so having battleships in there was awesome. I eventually even built a carrier in that C1 wormhole, and eventually I actually sold it for a profit, so it was an amazing adventure. But this has always been one of my backup plans, basically. If, for instance, a war deck would see everything raised in Dital, I could conceivably try another adventure like that, get into a C1 wormhole with a high-sec connection. And well, my dream would have been, can you imagine if I would have a massive Keepstar in there with a market in that C1 wormhole? I'll try to open it up for everyone. It would be super risky, of course, but it would be so cool to then have that wormhole with my market in it and with all the other services as well, that would then constantly just connect randomly through high-sec. And so today we're close to Amar, tomorrow we're close to Jita, the day after that would be somewhere in Minmatar space, and then you guys, anyone that follows the channel, could just come in, maybe enjoy the wormhole lifestyle for a little bit, do some trading in that market. Perhaps, you know, traders could find it very useful to cut on a lot of the travel time in some of these things. It's something I've thought about and that I may try at some point. Right now, my focus is still on Dital because we have some interesting adventures and things happening there as well. But yeah, a Keepstar I do think will not be possible anymore, but a Fortizar perhaps, that may still be an adventure to do at some points. After that, we should quickly cover the rollout as well. So next week already, on September the 8th, CCP is planning the seeding phase, where they'll make the quantum cores available on the market, so in those NPC stations, and they'll add the core room to the existing structures, so that if you want to be ready, you could go out there, buy one of these cores, put it in your structure, and you are ready. After that, in October, they're planning to make this a requirement for new structures that are online. So basically, they're planning to introduce this part of the mechanic, where after the 24-hour period, you have to put in the core in order to get into the shields. And then only for next year, apparently, somewhere in January, they're planning to make this mandatory for the existing structures. And that's part of the reason why I'm making this video. You can imagine someone that's taking a break right now and only comes back after this this date where this would be introduced, he may again find himself in a pretty bad spot with a station that doesn't have a core in it, all surfaces down, it's in hull, may even be destroyed because of that, and they're thinking, hey, I put plenty of fuel in that, we're online for the rest of my break. Well, this could again put some people in for some bad news. So hopefully everyone that owns a structure and does take breaks does notice this dev block as well. Finally, consequences and stakes. So CCP is trying to explain a little bit why they are doing this. I might actually read this one. Many of the current efforts in the EVE ecosystem are focused on the consequences of player actions and the stakes required to make them. It should mean something every time you place a structure and every time you destroy one. At the moment, this isn't always the case. Deploying structures haphazardly to bait opponents is often seen by many as a good strategy. We're definitely seeing that in nullsec. I think in faction warfare it's a bit of a problem as well, and the reason is raising them all down can be unsatisfying and laborious. So right now, yeah, they're making it a little bit more expensive to deploy a structure, and then you know, potentially more rewarding for those that destroy them. By placing an anti in the core of every structure in space, the amount of structure spam will be reduced, the incentive and reward for attacking structures will be increased, and the chance of both sides showing up to fight is also increased. So I personally don't mind this change. I think it is indeed a good idea, and I think a lot of people will concur that at the moment, especially the smaller structures, the medium structures like an Astrohus or Raitaru, it's very inexpensive. That does make it very accessible for newer players, but it also makes it rather abusable by the very large groups in certain settings. And I do hope that CCP thinks about perhaps a solution for these cores in wormhole space. Not sure what it could be. Perhaps like a special core that could maybe even be even more expensive, and that then what do you do with it once a core that big does find its way in a C1 wormhole, for instance? Perhaps a special core that can be transported once through one of these wormholes, but then it's stuck in there. And so even if you destroy the enemy keep star, all you can do with that core is perhaps build up your own keep star and then move and then use the core that way or something like that. I'm not sure, but I do hope that players that have actually managed to do that, which I mean, super impressive. I've built a carrier in a C1 wormhole. Can't imagine how much effort it is to build like a keep star or a Sotio in one of these low level wormholes. So hats off to you guys, and I do hope that CCP doesn't forget you. But overall, yeah, this just increasing the stakes a little bit when it comes to deploying structures makes a lot of sense, and well, I hope that everyone that owns structures is aware of this dev block and knows that they'll have to get their quantum cores before the end of the year, preferably. I think I'll just jump in, make the investments as soon as I can, although am I just going to expose myself to another 3 billion ISK for the Asbel? I guess I'll have to. You guys have been super generous anyways, so I don't deploy what I don't want to lose or can't afford to lose, and yeah, right now these cores don't seem insurmountable for owners either. So that's going to be it for this dev blog, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.